everyone. So I'm really pleased to be here talking with one of the great minds behind ENAR, the European Network Against Racism. So we are going to talk about how to build structures to create racial equality. Kim, do you think there has been any social change since 2020 social movements powered by the Black Lives Matter movement?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's been a huge amount of evolution thanks to Black Lives Matter. I think one thing that we saw is actually the power of technology, the power of social media to be able to give an impression and to mobilize people around the cause of anti-racism. If it hadn't been for the fact that we had Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter discussions about what had happened to George Floyd, Black Lives Matter would not have gotten the impact that it had. And we also see that impact taking place in Europe as well. So we see an increase in interest in the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We also see an increase in interest in supporting anti-racist movements across Europe to try to make a resounding change for the betterment of all of us.
And the tech industry has an important role on the transformation of our societies. We all know that. What is the role of the digital sector in this fight to make our society healthier based on the rights of equality and equity?
Digital touches everything. If we think about the digital sector, it is helping us in making better healthcare. It is making us able to have better public services. It is enabling us to communicate and to interact in different ways. So the digital sector has a huge role to play because the digital sector is in the process of building the society of tomorrow. So if the digital tech sector isn't able to deal with racism, what we are creating is a new society, a new digital society, which is reperpetrating all of the things that we're very sad about in the current society. So tech has a huge role to play in making the society of the future one that is systemically inclusive, but we also hope that the tech sector will enable and empower Black voices to also reach organizations and to be leaders of the tech revolution.
And, well, we all know that the internet is a powerful tool to acquiring information and knowledge. On the other hand, we all know that it's also used to spread hate speech and fake news. So we all know the drill. But Germany has gone further than any other Western country, democracy, to pursue individuals for what they say online. Do you think this is the right way to stop the appalling amount of online hate speech, defamation, and manipulative information?
I think it is one of the ways. So legislation is absolutely critical because it enables us to have rights and enables us to go to courts and to ensure that those rights are respected. So the lack of legislation is not an option. We need strong legislation across Europe and across the world that protects people from the risk of racism online and online hatred. So we definitely need legislation, and it is great that organizations and countries like Germany are putting in place the right barriers from a legal perspective so that we're able to benefit from protections. But it's not enough. It is part of the solution. The other part of the solution is the role that the tech sector plays. The tech sector enables online hate to take place, and the tech sector therefore has an important role to ensure that the softwares and the tools that we're designing protect the most vulnerable amongst us and ensures that we have effective remedies when we see that those which are the most vulnerable are being attacked online using bots, but also with coordinated attacks on people and people's opinions. So for us, it is really important to have the legislation on the one hand, but we also need society to also be mobilized to protect and to ensure that those rights are effective in the online space too.
But well, if most major tech companies have a void policing the internet, alleging the free speech rights, what each startup, founder, and tech creatives can do to change this narrative?
There's lots of things that an organization can do. For us, one of the things that we try to highlight very much with companies is the importance of inclusive recruitment and also inclusive organizations. And it is really important that the tech sector thinks about that because the tech sector is actually one of the worst performing sectors when it comes to diversity and inclusion. 75% of people working in the tech sector are white. 25% are other colors. And when you look at Black women, for example, it is only 5% of the workforce in tech is actually a black woman. So we definitely have a diversity and inclusion issue within tech, and that has a problem with regards to the way we design software, with the way we think about new products and services, because there are voices missing at the table. So what can the tech sector do? The tech sector can ensure that there are people of color in those discussions, in product design, in marketing, in the way we have the C-suite. So all these aspects are really important. So I would say inclusive recruitment, really looking beyond and trying to find those people is really important. The other aspect that we need to be thinking about, as you can see, I have fans. The other aspect that we need to be thinking about is that once we've recruited those people, that's not enough. We need to create a safe space for those people to shine inside those organizations. So if we're recruiting people only to force them out of the organization is wasting a lot of time, but it is also hurting people in the process. So for us, having organizations which put diversity and inclusion at the heart of what they do is important for the individual, but actually the business line is, there's also a business case for that, because organizations which put diversity and inclusion at the heart perform much better when it comes to new products and services, and they perform better in the stock market too. So there's the right thing to do argument, but I can also give you lots of arguments as to why financially it's also attractive to think about it.
But don't you think we are talking a lot about diversity and we are forgetting about inclusion?
Absolutely. And also I think sometimes diversity is starting to become like an all lives matter kind of thing. So if you take Black Lives Matter, the answer has been all lives matter, and I think diversity and inclusion becomes a bit of that. It becomes very wishy-washy. We're not quite sure what we're about, or we sometimes focus on one particular part of diversity without taking into account the intersections between the different diversity aspects. So for us, for example, the experience of a white woman is very different from the experience of a black woman. It's very different from the experience of a Muslim gay person. So those aspects are really important. And if you have a diversity and inclusion program that only focuses on one part of the equation, then you're completely forgetting what the whole point of inclusion is about, which is to create a space where everyone can, through their lived experience, contribute to the benefit of the organization.
And what is the starting point for creating the right policies? Should it be collecting ethnic data inside the organizations, voluntary and anonymized data collection, of course? Do you think that's the solution?
It is, again, part of the solution. I think the thing when it comes to tackling something like racism inside an organization, there's lots of different things that you need to put in place. But for us at ENAR and the European Network Against Racism, we really push hard the point that equality data is crucial. It is really important to have that compass which guides you through the dark forest to tell you how you're doing. So if you're not able to actually tell you how many people within our workforce is of a particular color, who are we missing? You're not able to do that and answer that question without equality data. You're not able to measure that your diversity and inclusion program, after 5 years, you have the same number of people, and yet somehow you've invested lots of money, but the money somehow has gone and evaporated somewhere, and without equality data, you can't figure that out. So for us, equality data is incredibly important to measure how are you doing, where you're going, and are you getting there? That's what equality data does, and why it's so crucial for you to have it to be able to inform your policies and your strategies moving forward.
So you believe in positive actions or positive discrimination, right?
I believe that it's important to recognize that we have, as I mentioned, a workforce in the tech sector, 75% white, 25% others, most of which are Asians, and 5% are blacks. I think if we don't do something drastic, in 15 years, we'll be talking about we have 75% of whites, we have 20% of Asians, and 5% of blacks. This is not acceptable. And the only way we're going to be able to address this is by taking concerted and proactive action to try to change this. Otherwise, in 100 years' time, we'll still be in that same situation. And we know, for example, when it comes to the gender pay gap, that's the reality. The reality is that the gender pay gap to be solved will take 100 years' time. That's not acceptable. We should be able to sort that out in 10 years.
And considering the current political moment in Europe, with the far right gaining ground, are you any optimistic about the years to come?
I think we're very concerned. So we're very concerned that there is a gap that is forming as a result of Black Lives Matter. I think all of us were very much moved by what happened to George Floyd. We all changed our social hashtags and we all joined the movement. And we see that already there is waning interest in the topic. And we are concerned that, for example, private sector, which has certainly mobilized as a result of Black Lives Matter, that interest will start waning as we start seeing that actually fighting racism isn't a sprint. It's a marathon. It's something which you have to live in and day out, and it will take many years to sort it out. And it will take a lot of action across the entire organization. And that's not easy. Systems change, it takes time, it is really tiresome. And so we definitely see that there is a bit of that waning situation. And then we also see indeed, as we see in politics, for example, in Italy or in Sweden, we have the rise of the far right. And the far right is proving to be very effective at mobilizing people against racialized communities. And we are very concerned that that is what is going to be moving forward. But I am also optimistic. I'm optimistic about the fact that we do have tech that can support us. Social media enables us to mobilize in ways that we could never imagine or dream before. We don't need the same level of resources that we used to have before to actually achieve social impact. And I think if we can focus on those aspects, if we can focus on that, then I think the future doesn't have to look so gloom. And I think there is definitely places of hope. But I think also the fact that you and I are talking here at Web Summit, that you and I are closing this startup university, that probably wouldn't have happened 4 or 5 years ago. That's also change, that's also progress, and we need to push the doors that are opening up for us as well.
And inside these corporations, these companies, what can we do, each one of us can do to change this narrative, to push to a different organization based on equality and equity?
There's so many things that we can do on an individual level as well as an organizational level. I think one thing is to ask, for example, who is missing around the table when we're making important decisions about business strategy, about the future of our organizations. I think when you see around your C-suite that you have nobody of color, maybe it's the point to ask, why is that not the case? I think the people which are working in organizations, employees, you have so much power, but sometimes that power isn't being used to ask the tough questions to the C-suite. And yet we see that sometimes when people mobilize, it can have an impact. So we've seen it when Google employees mobilize to say it is not normal that our C-suite is so white, that actually a change happened because employees called and asked for it. And I think that's something which every one of us can do in every meeting. Who is missing from the table and who should be at that table? And if they're not at that table, how do we get them into the organization? We have to challenge recruitment strategies to say it is not normal that we have that in the place.
Okay. So you think the solution is a global mobilization?
It's that. I think it's speaking up when there is silence. I think it's also about creating an inclusive environment. It's about challenging your organization to do better. And I think that's something which each and every one of us can do. When it comes to the organizational level, there's having a comprehensive diversity and inclusion program, which actually looks at recruitment, which looks at retention, which looks at career advancement, and tries using equality data to make sure that it's all effective and actually leading to impactful change. These are aspects that we can do to really make a difference moving forward for each and every one of us.
And what does the future hold for ENAR in this field to build structures, institutes, and attitudes based on race, equity, and equal distribution of power, privilege, and rights?
We're doing a lot in lots of space. As you can imagine, anti-racism is a work that takes us on many different journeys. So we're working, for example, on climate change. So we're really working at the intersection between, on the one hand, the climate change that is happening, but how it is experienced by racialized communities. Racialized communities are communities in Europe which are often the most exposed to poverty, are the most unresilient to change, and therefore they're the ones which will feel the full brunt of climate change. So for us, we're working in exploring how that intersection can be better addressed through public policies, through funding, through support from business and those types of things. So that is a new piece of work that we're essentially opening a new chapter in ENAR's history, where we're really trying to look at those aspects. We're also here at the Web Summit very interested in the digital society. So really the role that digital tech is playing in either creating a society of hate or what we hope is a society of inclusion. So we're also exploring kind of the role that artificial intelligence and bias within artificial intelligence is impacting the ability of racialized communities to be full citizens of the digital society. So we're looking at those aspects, and we're also very much exploring and seeing the role that business has to play in supporting the anti-racist movement. So for us, DEI programs are essentially the way that companies can say we are an ally to the anti-racist cause, and we're trying to build bridges with those organizations which are willing to be anti-racist in the way they do business. We have an open hand to work with them to see how their DEI programs can be improved, to see how they can measure impact, and to hold them to account to ensure that their programs are really delivering measurable, impactful change for racialized individuals.
And if I think as a founder or has a startup or a company, I think I can be an asset for ENAR. How can I join forces with you to change the world?
Yeah, and all the help is needed. So to make systemic change, we need business, we need public sector, we need civil society, we need you in the audience to make that change happen. So for us, we have actually a program which is called the Equal at Work program. It is a program which enables us to work with companies side by side to determine, so they get information from us in terms of what we are facing as the anti-racist movement. Business can then be supportive of our advocacy actions, so we lobby the European institutions, we lobby national governments, we try to make laws change, we shout loudly when there is racism taking place in different countries. So having that support from business to say, for us, it is also not good that these things are happening in society, it hurts our business, we need change. That is a very powerful message which politicians and public officials really listen to. So having business on our side is incredibly, critically important. And our Equal at Work program enables them to participate in our actions, support our work, but in exchange they get support from us as well to become better anti-racist allies.
And very important too, how ENAR can help these new startups, these new companies in the tech industry founded by for example, black founders or other minorities to build this society that we all know it's needed.
Yeah, this is a new piece of work that we're actually exploring within ENAR. So we have a foundation called the ENAR Foundation, and its mission essentially is to build a systemically inclusive society. So what I was discussing before. And here, there are a number of things that we've identified are proving to be barriers for black owners, particularly in Europe, to be able to participate and to be entrepreneurs, to develop the unicorns of the future, and to contribute to that exercise in Europe. So for us, we are indeed looking at creating communities, kind of professional communities, which enables people from racialized backgrounds to come together, to coalesce, to build pan-European networks similar to what ENAR does for civil society organizations. We're looking to explore to do the very same thing for startups as well. We're also very excited that we're discussing with a number of our donors. So we have a number of donors which we've been working with very closely, who are very willing to participate and to join us in that journey, to join us in the journey of creating a fund which enables and supports racialized individuals who are working at the intersection of, first of all, creating representations that black people can also be business leaders, can also be the future unicorns of Europe, but at the same time, also that we have a place for them to grow and to be nourished and to be supported in what they have to do.
Kim, unfortunately, our time is over. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and yours with us.
Thank you so much.